Thank you. So Paul and I agreed I would begin and then he will take over from me and give the concluding remarks. So firstly, thank you so much for this opportunity. And as we've just been reminded by Marcelo, time devours us all. So let me get my presentation on and I can quickly take us through some of the key challenges of water as we see it. Okay. Sorry, madam. So water is life, livelihoods, and health. We know that. We also know now that climate change is adding to water stress in the world. And the key reason for this is that we will see more rain in fewer number of rainy days. If I just give you one number for you to remember, in India, we get on an average only 100 hours of rain in a year. And we are now talking about more rain in fewer number of those hours. And that's why, and you will hear from, you heard it in the morning as well, it leads to floods and then droughts. Climate change is also adding to heat stress, which in turn is going to add to the demand for water. But the point that I want to make very clearly is that climate change is only an exacerbating factor. Our water crisis stems from our inability to build an affordable system of water management to supply clean water to all, to take back the waste, to recycle the used water for all. So when we talk about resilience, we are really talking about reworking the current practices so that we can make a water-wise and a water-secure future. We do a database of extreme weather events in India. And we do this because the Indian Meteorological Department has an extremely good information source that comes out on a daily basis on what they qualify as an extreme weather event. The bottom line of this is that in a country like India, we are seeing now one extreme weather event a day almost in a year. One in a day, which means more rain, more storms, more cyclones, more heat stress. This is official data. Now, this has huge impact on the poorest in our world, the most vulnerable, and those who have not contributed to the stock of greenhouse gases. This is the ultimate immorality of our world. And we need to remember the victims and put a human face on them. The fact is that this intensity and frequency is making people unable to cope. We heard from Marcelo today about migration. The fact is, migration is not a single factor. It is a multiple factor. And it is about how these extreme events coming on top of all the other distress factors is leading people to leave their homes. They are being pushed out. This is not the pull of the city, but the push. If you look at water, and from our database, you will see just in the last year, 65 weather stations across India reported that they had the highest 24-hour rainfall in 122 years. I talked about the extreme rain events, and that's really the crisis that we are seeing. In India, we used to talk about rain as something that happened over days. Today, a whole year's rain could literally fall in a matter of a few hours. And that's really what we are seeing across the region, across Africa. You talk about, if you open your newspaper of yesterday, you would have read about the floods in Afghanistan. Everywhere in the world, this is the reality. But the fact is that this also tells us that there is an opportunity. And this is really what gives me excitement. Unlike sometimes when you get very depressed about the energy trajectory of the world, the water system really means societal transformation so that we can hold the water, we can recharge it, we can minimize and recycle every drop of water. But for a moment, let's also understand how vulnerable different regions are becoming. The Himalayas are the third pole. They are the weather water system of our region. Millions and millions depend upon it. And yet, data today shows you how the Hindu Kush Himalayas are warming fast. Remember, these implications will have massive impact on massive numbers of people. But what I want to focus on is to tell you that I believe in the practice, a new practice is possible. It does mean taking the courage to think differently, but a new practice is possible. The first challenge is to augment water. Some years ago, we produced a book called Dying Wisdom. It documented traditional water harvesting technologies from across the regions of India, the ecosystems of India. And what you found was this amazing sophistication of engineering solutions where people had learned to live with water. They had learned to live with the scarcity of water. And this really allowed us to rethink what could be done in modern India about relearning from these traditions, bringing it back into practice. But the bottom line of this practice is that it would require deepening of democracy, because these water systems are not state managed. These water systems would have to be community managed because they are decentralized systems. Today, many places of India, the government policy is to regenerate, rejuvenate the lakes, the ponds, build rural assets, water assets. And this then gives you the possibility of learning resilience in a very different way. Same thing with our cities. If you look at this map, this is a map of Hyderabad, a very modern city of India. If you look at all the blue dots, those were the lakes of Hyderabad. The tragedy is that modern India forgot all this. In fact, the modern airport of Hyderabad is built on the catchment of its biggest lake, because planners could only see land. They can't see water bodies. And this is really the thinking that we have to get back. We have to get back the ability to think again about a water system which is most affordable and so inclusive. Today, our water system brings water from longer and longer distances. The city of Hyderabad could forget its lakes and ponds because it was bringing its water from 100 kilometers away. But the fact is that water system is capital intensive, resource intensive. It leads to conflict between the rural and the urban. It adds to the cost of supply, and that then creates the crisis for the future. This is the opportunity to rethink. The other challenge is really about using less and wasting less. Again, a lot of this is something that is in our hands. It's about changing diet, food that is more prudent, less wasteful. In my country, we grew millets, which were grown in areas which had less water. But over time, we changed diets so that every one of us would want to eat rice, which is a water-intensive crop, good for a region which has a lot of water, not so good for other regions. But the most exciting part is, because as an environmentalist, we have been fighting water pollution in our country. And what we find is that you can't manage water pollution unless you fundamentally change the method of water supply and sewage management, so that everybody gets the right to a toilet and everybody's excreta can be intercepted, collected, and treated. But most importantly, and we heard this in the morning, that circular economy means not putting that treated water back into the river, but putting it back on the land, using and reusing the excreta so that no land, no water is polluted. So some years ago, we did something which I wondered if I should name in this August gathering, but we called them shit flow diagrams. And we did these city by city to map where is the city excreta going. And we found that the majority, in fact, every city of India had what we call on-site treatment. People were not connected to the official sewage system. But instead of getting depressed about this and talking about us becoming another London or New York, our challenge was to our government, why can't we use this opportunity to reinvent? Why can't we talk about today, and this is something that has become government policy now, that non-sewage sanitation systems, so that you can intercept the excreta and transport it for treatment. But as I said, the wastewater is reused. That's the circular economy. So we are not doing water to waste, but water to water. I give this analogy in India, and I just use this here again, just to explain why. The fact is, 20 years ago, none of us could get a landline telephone line in India. Today, we have satellite systems. We are talking about the same thing with energy grids. Why can't we do that with sanitation? Decentralized solutions in which we have on-site systems which build the resilience. So at the end, if I may, climate change in water is not about another technocratic solution. It's really about building that just and inclusive society. We know that climate change impacts add to our crisis, our insecurity, and impoverishment. But they're also a way for us to build resilient societies with well-being. For this, we need that transformation. That in our case, we need people to connect the water, society, culture connection. But at the end, it is only possible if we reinvent the paradigm of growth so that they are designed for affordability. We cannot have a sustainable future if it is not an inclusive future. And we need those solutions to be bold and imaginative, but most importantly, and that's the bottom line, they need to work for all. They don't work for all, they won't work for anyone. Thank you very much.